The fluorescent lights in Blake Moretti's executive suite hummed with a frequency that made my temples throb. I'd been staring at the same spreadsheet for 20 minutes, the numbers blurring together as exhaustion pulled at the edges of my consciousness. My lower back ached from sitting in this uncomfortable chair for the past 6 hours, and the sharp corner of my desk had left an impression on my wrist from where I'd been leaning too heavily. 2 years. 2 years of this. I shifted in my seat, wincing as the movement sent a spike of discomfort through my spine. The scent of Blake's expensive cologne lingered in the air, a woody, masculine fragrance with notes of bergamot and leather that seemed to permeate every surface in this office. It was suffocating in its constancy, a reminder of his presence even when he was locked away in his private office beyond the mahogany doors. Mitchell. His voice cut through my thoughts like a blade, sharp and cold. I looked up to find him standing in his doorway, 6 feet of tailored perfection in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Blake Moretti was the kind of handsome that made people stop and stare, all sharp angles and dangerous edges with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. But it was his eyes that haunted me, steel gray and perpetually filled with something that looked like contempt whenever they landed on me. "Yes, Mr. Moretti?" I kept my voice professional, neutral, even though my pulse quickened the way it always did when he addressed me directly. "The Santoro contracts. Where are they?" I gestured to the stack of folders on the corner of my desk. "Right here. I finished reviewing them an hour ago. Everything's in order." He crossed the room with that predatory grace he possessed, each step deliberate and controlled. When he reached my desk, he didn't look at me, just grabbed the folders and flipped through them with barely concealed irritation. His jaw tightened, a muscle ticking beneath the sharp line of his cheekbone. These should have been on my desk by 4. It was currently 4:03 p.m. "I was waiting for the final signature from their legal team," I explained, keeping my tone even despite the frustration building in my chest. It came through at 3:58. His eyes finally met mine, cold and assessing. "I don't pay you to make excuses, Mitchell. I pay you to anticipate problems and solve them before they become my concern." The unfairness of it stung, but I swallowed the retort that wanted to escape. This was how it always was with Blake. Nothing I did was ever good enough, fast enough, thorough enough. He found fault in everything, treated me like an inconvenience he barely tolerated, even though I worked harder than anyone else in this organization. "It won't happen again," I said through gritted teeth. "See that it doesn't." He turned away, dismissing me as easily as one might dismiss a servant. "And get me the quarterly reports from all divisions by tomorrow morning. I want them consolidated and analyzed." That was at least 40 hours of work. He knew it. I knew it. But I simply nodded. "Of course." As he walked back toward his office, I caught myself watching the way his shoulders moved beneath his jacket, the confident set of his spine. I hated that I noticed these things about him, hated the way my body responded to his proximity despite the cruelty in his words. Blake Moretti was poison wrapped in an attractive package, and I'd been slowly dying from exposure for 2 years. The phone on my desk rang, mercifully pulling me from my thoughts. I answered on the second ring. "Mr. Moretti's office. This is Brianna." "Miss Mitchell." The voice on the other end was smooth, accented with Italian inflections. "Antonio Russo, one of Blake's senior associates. I need to confirm Mr. Moretti's attendance at tonight's dinner with the Genovese family." My fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up Blake's calendar. "He's scheduled to attend, 7 o'clock at Giordano's." "Excellent. And yourself? Will you be accompanying him?" The question caught me off guard. In 2 years, I'd never been invited to attend any of Blake's business dinners. My role was confined to this office, this desk, this endless cycle of work that kept me chained to a man who despised me. "I wasn't aware my attendance was required," I said carefully. "Mr. Moretti didn't mention it." Antonio sounded surprised. The Genovese are bringing their full team. It would be appropriate to have your assistant present for note-taking. My assistant. As if that's all I was. But then again, wasn't it? I'll check with Mr. Moretti, I replied, already dreading the conversation. After ending the call, I stared at the closed door of Blake's office for a long moment. The thought of spending an evening in his presence, watching him charm and negotiate with the same men who probably ordered murders over dessert, made my stomach twist. But if it was required for my job, I had no choice. I knocked softly on his door, waiting for his curt "enter" before stepping inside. Blake's private office was a study in controlled elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floors. His desk was massive, an antique piece that looked like it belonged in a museum, and the leather chairs arranged around a small conference table in the corner cost more than my car. He didn't look up from whatever he was reading. "What is it?" Antonio Russo called. He mentioned that the Genovese are bringing their full team tonight and suggested I attend for note-taking purposes. Now he looked up, and the expression on his face was one of pure irritation. Absolutely not. I blinked, surprised by the vehemence in his response. "Sir, if it's necessary for—" I said no, Mitchell. His voice was ice. "You're not coming tonight." "May I ask why not?" His eyes narrowed dangerously. "Because I said so. That's all the explanation you need." The dismissal was clear, but something in his tone made me push back, just slightly. "With all due respect, Mr. Moretti, if this is part of my job responsibilities—" "Your job responsibilities are what I say they are." He stood, moving around his desk with that same predatory grace. When he was close enough that I could smell his cologne again, count the gold flecks in his gray eyes, he leaned down slightly. "And right now, your job is to stay here, out of my way, and do exactly what I tell you to do. Nothing more, nothing less. Am I making myself clear?" My hands clenched into fists at my sides, nails digging into my palms. "Crystal clear, Mr. Moretti." "Good." He straightened, already turning away from me as if the conversation was over. "That will be all." I left his office on shaking legs, anger and humiliation burning in my chest. This was my life. This was what I'd chosen when I took this job 2 years ago, desperate for the obscene salary that Blake Moretti offered. A salary that paid for my mother's medical bills, her treatments, the round-the-clock care she needed back in Ohio. I couldn't afford to quit, no matter how much I wanted to. No matter how much Blake's contempt carved away at my self-respect day after day. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of phone calls and emails, the monotonous tasks that filled my days. At 6 o'clock, Blake emerged from his office, adjusting his cufflinks as he prepared to leave for his dinner meeting. "I need the Santoro analysis on my desk by 8 a.m., he said without looking at me. "Don't stay too late." The contradiction in his statement wasn't lost on me. He wanted the work done but didn't want me to stay late to do it. Just another impossible standard to meet. "Yes, sir." He paused at the elevator, his hand hovering over the call button. For a moment I thought he might say something else, but then the doors opened and he stepped inside without another word. I watched the numbers descend until they reached the ground floor, then finally allowed myself to slump in my chair. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Mom, how are you, sweetheart? Haven't heard from you in a few days." Guilt twisted in my stomach. I'd been so consumed with work that I'd barely had time to call her. "I'm good, Mom. Just busy with work. How are you feeling?" "Better. The new treatment is helping. Don't worry about me." But I did worry. Constantly. That's why I was here, enduring Blake Moretti's cruelty, because the alternative was watching my mother suffer without the care she needed. I set my phone down and pulled up the Santoro files, beginning the tedious work of analysis that would keep me here until well past midnight. The office grew quiet around me as other employees filtered out, heading home to their families, their normal lives. Around 10 o'clock, my eyes were burning, and my back was screaming in protest when I heard the elevator ding. I looked up, surprised to see Blake stepping out. He stopped when he saw me still at my desk, something unreadable flickering across his face. "You're still here." "You needed the analysis by 8 a.m., I reminded him, keeping my voice neutral despite my exhaustion. "I'm almost finished." He walked toward me slowly, his expression impossible to read in the dim lighting. When he reached my desk, he stood there for a long moment, just looking at me. It made my skin prickle with awareness, my pulse quickening in a way I couldn't control. "How long have you been working for me, Mitchell?" he asked suddenly. 2 years. 2 years next month. "And in all that time, have you ever complained? Ever pushed back against anything I've asked of you?" The question confused me. "No, sir." "Why not?" "Because I need this job. Because my mother's life depends on the salary you pay me. Because I have no choice." But I couldn't say any of that. Instead, I simply replied, "Because you're my employer, and I respect the position." Something dark flashed in his eyes. Respect. He said the word like it tasted bitter. "You don't respect me, Mitchell. You tolerate me because you need the paycheck." The accuracy of his statement made me flinch, but I didn't deny it. What would be the point? "Get it done and go home," he said abruptly, turning away. "You look exhausted." "How was your dinner?" I asked before I could stop myself. He paused, glancing back at me with those cold gray eyes. "Fine." "Why do you ask?" "Just making conversation." A muscle in his jaw tightened. "We don't make conversation, Mitchell. We maintain a professional relationship, nothing more." And with that final reminder of exactly where I stood in his world, Blake Moretti walked back to the elevator and disappeared, leaving me alone with my spreadsheets and the crushing weight of another day survived in his orbit. The next morning arrived too quickly, dragging me from restless sleep with the harsh buzz of my alarm. I'd managed maybe 4 hours of actual rest after finishing Blake's analysis at 1 a.m., and my body felt every lost minute as I forced myself through the motions of getting ready. The subway was packed with the usual morning rush, bodies pressed too close together in the artificial warmth of the train car. I stood near the doors, one hand gripping the pole for balance, the other clutching my coffee like a lifeline. The burnt, bitter taste barely registered as I drained half the cup in desperate gulps. By the time I reached Moretti Enterprises, the imposing glass tower that housed Blake's legitimate business operations, my nerves were already frayed. The building stood as a monument to his power, 50 stories of steel and ambition that dominated the Chicago skyline. Most people saw a successful import-export company. I saw the facade that hid something much darker. The lobby was all polished marble and modern art, the kind of space designed to intimidate. I nodded to the security guard who recognized me after 2 years of these early morning arrivals, then headed straight for the executive elevator that would carry me to the top floor. Blake's office was still dark when I arrived, which meant I'd beaten him here for once. Small victories. I settled into my desk, pulling up the files I'd finished last night, making sure everything was perfect before he arrived to find fault with it. At precisely 7:30, the elevator doors opened and Blake stepped out. He looked impeccable as always, not a hair out of place, his suit probably costing more than I made in a month. But there was something different about his demeanor this morning, a tightness around his eyes that suggested he'd slept as poorly as I had. "Good morning, Mr. Moretti." I kept my voice professional, neutral. He stopped at my desk, those gray eyes scanning me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You completed the analysis. It's on your desk, everything you asked for." He nodded once, a curt acknowledgement that was probably the closest thing to praise I'd ever received from him. As he turned toward his office, I noticed the way his hand flexed at his side, as if he wanted to reach for something but stopped himself. The morning proceeded normally, a series of phone calls and meetings that I coordinated with practiced efficiency. I'd learned Blake's rhythms over these 2 years, knew when he wanted his coffee refreshed, when he needed files pulled, when to stay invisible and when to anticipate his needs before he voiced them. It was exhausting, this constant vigilance, but it had become second nature. Around 11, Antonio Russo arrived for a meeting. He was a stocky man in his 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He nodded politely to me as he passed my desk. "Miss Mitchell, you look lovely today." "Thank you, Mr. Russo." I'd learned early on that acknowledging compliments was safer than deflecting them in this world. He disappeared into Blake's office, and I returned to my work, trying not to think about what they might be discussing. Weapons shipments, territorial disputes, payment collections. The less I knew about the actual operations, the better I slept at night. 30 minutes later, 3 more men arrived. I recognized 2 of them from previous meetings. Marco De Luca and Vincent Genovese, both senior figures in the Chicago organization. The third man was unfamiliar, younger than the others, with slicked back hair and an expensive watch that caught the light as he moved. "Mr. Moretti is expecting you," I said, gesturing toward his office. "Go right in." The unfamiliar man paused at my desk, his eyes traveling over me in a way that made my skin crawl. "I don't think we've met. I'm Dante Genovese, Vincent's nephew." I forced a polite smile. "Brianna Mitchell, Mr. Moretti's executive assistant." "Executive assistant." His smile widened, revealing perfect white teeth. "That's a fancy title for a secretary." "It's what the position entails," I replied evenly, already disliking him. "Well, Brianna Mitchell, maybe we should get coffee sometime. You could tell me all about what working for Blake Moretti entails." Before I could formulate a polite rejection, Blake's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Dante, my office. Now." I looked up to find Blake standing in his doorway, and the expression on his face made my blood run cold. His eyes were fixed on Dante with an intensity that radiated danger. His jaw set in a hard line that I'd seen before, usually right before someone's employment with the organization ended abruptly. Dante seemed oblivious to the threat, offering me one more smile before sauntering into the office. The door closed with a sharp click that somehow sounded ominous. I tried to return to my work, but my hands were shaking slightly. Something about that interaction had felt wrong, like I'd inadvertently stepped onto a landmine without realizing it. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. I could hear the rumble of male voices through the heavy door, occasionally rising in what sounded like disagreement, before dropping back to conversational levels. At one point I heard Blake's voice, sharp and authoritative, cutting through whatever discussion was happening. When the door finally opened, the men filed out one by one. Antonio nodded to me as he passed. Marco and Vincent barely acknowledged my presence. But Dante paused again, leaning against my desk with that same presumptuous familiarity. "So, about that coffee? Miss Mitchell has work to do." Blake's voice was deadly quiet as he appeared behind Dante. "And you have somewhere else to be." The younger man straightened, finally seeming to pick up on the danger he was in. "Right, of course." He looked at me one more time. "Maybe another time, Brianna." The use of my first name made Blake's expression darken even further, if that was possible. I watched as he tracked Dante's departure with those cold gray eyes, every line of his body taut with barely controlled tension. When the elevator doors finally closed behind the men, Blake turned that furious gaze on me. My office. Now. Confusion and apprehension warred in my chest as I followed him into his domain. He closed the door behind us with careful control, the kind of restraint that was somehow more frightening than if he'd slammed it. "What was that?" he demanded, moving to stand behind his desk, putting the barrier between us. What was what, sir? Dante Genovese, flirting with you, asking you to coffee. I blinked, completely thrown by his focus. I don't know. He was just being friendly? Friendly. Blake's laugh was harsh, devoid of humor. Men like Dante Genovese are never just friendly, especially not with women who work for me. I don't understand why this matters, I said carefully. I wasn't encouraging him. I was just being polite. It matters because you represent this organization when you're sitting at that desk. His hands were flat on the surface, fingers splayed, and I could see the tension in his shoulders. It matters because the Genovese family needs to understand boundaries. I'm sorry if I did something wrong. Don't. He cut me off, his voice sharp. Don't apologize for something that wasn't your fault. The contradiction confused me. If it wasn't my fault, why was he angry with me? Blake seemed to realize the same thing because he exhaled slowly, some of the tension draining from his posture. When he spoke again, his voice was calmer, more controlled. Just stay away from Dante Genovese. If he approaches you again, you tell me immediately. Understood? Yes, sir. He dismissed me with a wave of his hand, already turning his attention to something on his computer screen. I left his office feeling more confused than ever about Blake Moretti's moods and motivations. The afternoon brought its own challenges. A crisis with a shipment that required frantic phone calls to resolve, a scheduling conflict that needed delicate negotiation, the constant stream of emails and documents that demanded my attention. By 5 o'clock, I was exhausted and ready for the day to end. But Blake was still in his office, still working, which meant I couldn't leave until he did. At 6:30, my stomach growling loud enough to be embarrassing, Blake's door opened. Mitchell, order dinner. Whatever you want from Giacomo's, put it on the company card. I looked up in surprise. Dinner, sir. You haven't eaten, have you? The observation caught me off guard. No, not since breakfast. Then order food, and get something for yourself. We'll be here a while longer. We? He gave me a look that suggested I was being deliberately obtuse. Yes, we. I need you to review the contracts that came in this afternoon before I sign them in the morning. So much for an early night. But the unexpected offer of dinner was strange. In 2 years, Blake had never once suggested I order food on the company account, never acknowledged that I might be hungry or tired or human. I called Giacomo's and placed an order for fettuccine carbonara for him, his usual, and risotto for myself. The food arrived 40 minutes later, and I brought Blake's portion to his office, setting it on his desk along with fresh coffee. Thank you, he said absently, not looking up from whatever document he was reviewing. You're welcome. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. Mitchell. Yes? He finally looked up, those gray eyes fixing on me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. Eat at your desk. Don't wait to take it home. I won't. As I left his office, I could feel his gaze on my back, a weight that I'd grown used to over the years, but never quite understood. Blake Moretti was a puzzle I couldn't solve, a man who treated me with contempt one moment and showed flashes of something almost like concern the next. I ate my risotto while reviewing contracts, the creamy texture a welcome comfort after a long day. The office was quiet around us, the building empty except for the security staff and whoever else in Blake's organization worked these strange hours. Around 8 o'clock, I finished my review and knocked on Blake's door. The contracts are ready for your signature. Bring them in. I entered his office to find him leaning back in his chair, his tie loosened and the top button of his shirt undone. It was the most casual I'd ever seen him, and something about it made him seem more human, less like the cold, controlled figure he usually presented. Any issues? He asked as I set the contracts on his desk. Nothing significant. I flagged a few clauses that might need clarification, but overall they look standard. He picked up the first contract, scanning through it with practiced efficiency. I stood there, waiting, unsure if I was dismissed or expected to remain. "How's your mother?" The question came out of nowhere, shocking me into silence for a moment. She's doing better, actually. The new treatment seems to be helping." Blake nodded, still reading. "That's good. You mentioned she was having trouble with the last round." I stared at him, completely thrown. "I didn't realize you paid attention to things like that." "I pay attention to everything that concerns my employees." He looked up then, his expression unreadable. "Particularly employees who've been with me as long as you have." "Oh." I didn't know what else to say. This was the longest personal conversation we'd ever had, and I had no idea how to navigate it. "You work hard, Mitchell. Harder than anyone else in this building." He set down the contract, his full attention on me now. "I know I'm not easy to work for." Was this an apology? From Blake Moretti? I must have been hallucinating from exhaustion. "I manage," I said carefully. "Yes, you do." Something flickered in his eyes, there and gone before I could identify it. "Why? Why do I manage? Why do you stay?" He leaned forward, elbows on his desk. "You could work anywhere, Brianna. Your skills, your dedication. Any company would be lucky to have you. So why stay here, working for someone who treats you the way I do?" The use of my first name made my breath catch. In 2 years, he'd never called me anything but Mitchell. "The salary," I admitted, because there was no point in lying. "I need it, for my mother's care." He nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he'd already suspected. "And if money wasn't an issue? If you could work anywhere, would you still choose to be here?" The question felt like a trap, but I answered honestly. "No, probably not. Because I'm a terrible boss. Because you're a complicated one," I corrected, surprising myself with my candor. "And because working for you means being complicit in things I'd rather not think about too closely." Blake's expression darkened, but not with anger, with something that looked almost like regret. "Fair enough." He returned his attention to the contracts, effectively ending the conversation. I stood there for another moment, waiting to see if he had anything else to say, but he'd retreated behind his professional mask again. "That will be all, Mitchell. Go home. Get some rest." I left his office feeling more confused than ever about the enigmatic man I worked for. The man who despised me one moment and showed hints of humanity the next. The next week passed in a strange limbo. Blake's behavior toward me hadn't exactly improved. He was still demanding, still critical, still treated me with that cool professional distance I'd come to expect. But something had shifted. Some invisible line had been crossed during our late-night conversation in his office. He called me Brianna now, instead of Mitchell. Not consistently, and never in front of others, but when we were alone in his office or working late, my first name would slip from his lips with an ease that made my stomach flutter in ways I tried not to examine too closely. I told myself it meant nothing, that I was reading into small kindnesses that any decent employer would extend. But Blake Moretti had never been a decent employer, which made these changes all the more unsettling. It was Thursday afternoon when everything exploded. I was at my desk, coordinating a conference call between Blake and his associates in New York, when the elevator opened to reveal 3 men I'd never seen before. They weren't dressed like Blake's usual associates. No expensive suits or Italian leather shoes. These men wore jeans and leather jackets, their faces hard with the kind of lived experience that came from violence. "Can I help you?" I asked, already reaching for the phone to alert Blake. The tallest one, a man with a scar running down his left cheek, smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "We're here to see Moretti." "Do you have an appointment?" "Don't need one." Before I could respond, Blake's door opened. He took one look at the men, and his expression went cold. every muscle in his body tensing with readiness. "Gentlemen, you're early." "We need to talk," Scarface said. "Now." Blake's gaze flickered to me, something unreadable passing through his eyes. "Mitchell, take an early lunch. 2 hours." It was barely 11:30, and I'd never taken a 2-hour lunch in my life. But the tone of his voice made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. It was a command meant to get me out of the building. "Of course." I grabbed my purse, acutely aware of the tension crackling in the air. As I passed the men on my way to the elevator, I felt their eyes on me, assessing, calculating. It made my skin crawl. The elevator doors couldn't close fast enough. I spent my unexpected freedom wandering the streets near the office, too anxious to eat despite my empty stomach. Whatever meeting was happening upstairs involved people who made even Blake's usual dangerous associates look civilized. The thought of what might be discussed, what decisions might be made, sent chills down my spine. 2 hours later, I returned to find the office empty except for Blake. He was standing at his window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the Chicago skyline with an expression I'd never seen before. He looked tired, not physically exhausted, but worn down in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. "Mr. Moretti," I ventured quietly, "is everything all right?" He didn't turn around. Define all right. I set my purse down, unsure whether to stay or give him privacy. Before I could decide, he spoke again. "Those men you saw earlier, they work for the Bratva, the Russian mob." His voice was flat, matter of fact. "They're expanding into Chicago, pushing into territories that have belonged to my family for 3 generations. I knew I shouldn't ask, shouldn't engage with this part of his life that I'd deliberately kept at arm's length. But the words came out anyway. What did they want? To negotiate, or threaten. With the Bratva, it's sometimes hard to tell the difference. He turned to face me then, and the look in his eyes made my breath catch. "They're dangerous, Brianna. More dangerous than anyone else operating in this city." The use of my first name, the gravity in his tone, it felt like a warning. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked softly. Blake crossed the room until he was standing directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, count the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. "Because you work for me. Because that makes you a target by association. Because I need you to be careful." "Careful how?" "Don't go anywhere alone after dark. Take the company car instead of the subway. If anyone you don't recognize approaches you, you call me immediately. Understood?" My heart was pounding against my ribs. "You're scaring me." "Good." His hand came up, hesitating for just a moment before his fingers brushed a strand of hair away from my face. The touch was so gentle, so at odds with everything I knew about him, that I froze. "You should be scared. This world I live in, it's not safe. It's never been safe. And I've been fooling myself thinking I could keep you separate from it. Blake, don't." He dropped his hand, stepping back as if the contact had burned him. "Don't make this more complicated than it already is." "I don't understand what's happening," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "One day you treat me like I'm disposable. The next you're warning me about Russian mobsters and touching my hair. I don't know which version of you is real." Something raw flashed across his face. "Neither do I." Before I could process that admission, his phone rang. He answered it with a curt, "Moretti," his expression shuddering back into professional coldness. "Yes." "No, tomorrow won't work. Friday, my office. Bring everyone." He ended the call and looked at me with those inscrutable eyes. "I need you to clear my schedule for Friday afternoon, all of it, and I want you to take a half day. But that's not a request, Brianna." The firmness in his tone left no room for argument. "Take the afternoon off. Visit your mother. Do something that reminds you there's a world outside of this office. I wanted to argue, to demand explanations for his erratic behavior and cryptic warnings. But the set of his jaw told me I'd get nowhere. Fine, I conceded. Friday afternoon off. Thank you. He moved past me toward his office, pausing at the door. And Brianna, be careful, please. The please undid something in my chest, because Blake Moretti didn't say please. He gave orders, made demands, expected compliance without question. But he just asked, not commanded, and the vulnerability in that single word shook me more than any threat ever could. That evening, as I rode home in the company car Blake had insisted on sending, complete with a driver who looked more bodyguard than chauffeur, I stared out at the city lights and tried to make sense of everything. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Dante Genovese. Got your number from the company directory. Still interested in that coffee? I deleted the message without responding, remembering Blake's warning to stay away from Vincent's nephew, but the fact that Dante had sought out my personal number sent a chill through me. How many others had access to my information? How exposed was I really in Blake's world? When I finally reached my small apartment in a less fashionable part of town, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to calm my racing heart. The contrast between my modest studio and Blake's world of luxury and danger had never felt more stark. I called my mother, needing to hear her voice, to ground myself in something real and uncomplicated. Brianna, sweetheart. Her voice was stronger than it had been in months, the new treatment working small miracles. I wasn't expecting to hear from you tonight. Everything okay? Yeah, Mom. Just wanted to check in. How are you feeling? Better every day. The nurses say I might even be able to come home soon if I keep improving. She paused. But what about you? You sound stressed. Just work stuff. Nothing to worry about. That boss of yours still treating you poorly? I thought about Blake's hand in my hair, the concern in his eyes when he'd warned me about the bratva, the way he'd said my name like it was something precious. It's complicated. Men usually are. I could hear the smile in her voice. Just promise me you're taking care of yourself. You work too hard, baby girl. I promise, Mom. I love you. Love you too, sweetheart. After we hung up, I sat in my tiny kitchen, eating leftover takeout and thinking about the past 2 years. I'd sacrificed so much to keep this job, my social life, my peace of mind, my self-respect, all so my mother could have the care she needed. But now something was changing, shifting in ways I didn't fully understand. Blake was changing. Or maybe he was finally showing me who he'd been all along beneath the cruelty. The thought terrified me. Friday arrived too quickly. Blake was tense all morning, his jaw tight and his responses clipped even by his usual standards. He barely looked at me as he went through his schedule, confirming appointments and making last-minute changes. Remember, he said as noon approached. Half day. I want you out of here by 12:30. I remember. I hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering me since his warning. Blake, are you in danger? He finally met my eyes, and what I saw there made my heart clench. Always. But I can handle it. That's not reassuring. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It wasn't meant to be. Go, Brianna. Get out of here while you can. The phrasing felt ominous, but I gathered my things and left, looking back only once to find Blake standing at his window again, a solitary figure silhouetted against the Chicago skyline. I spent the afternoon at a coffee shop, unable to shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. I tried to read, tried to lose myself in the normalcy of afternoon caffeine and people watching, but my mind kept returning to Blake's office, to whatever meeting was happening without me there. At 4 o'clock, my phone rang. Blake. Are you home? His voice was tight, controlled. "No, I'm at a coffee shop near. Give me the address. Now." The urgency in his tone made my hands shake as I rattled off the location. "What's wrong?" "Stay there. Don't move. I'm sending a car." "Blake, you're scaring me again. The Bratva knows about you." Each word was clipped, precise. "They know you work for me. They know where you live. They know everything. You're not safe at your apartment." Ice flooded my veins. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that as of right now, you're under my protection whether you want it or not. The car will be there in 5 minutes. Get in it. Don't argue, don't ask questions. Just get in the car and let Dominic bring you to my estate." "Your estate? Blake, I can't just—" "Yes, you can. You will." His voice softened marginally. "Please, Brianna. Trust me on this. Let me keep you safe." The line went dead before I could respond. True to his word, a black SUV pulled up exactly 5 minutes later. The driver, Dominic, presumably, was built like a tank, with a face that suggested he'd seen and done things most people couldn't imagine. He opened the back door without a word. "Mr. Moretti is expecting you, ma'am." I climbed in with shaking hands, my coffee abandoned on the table inside. As the SUV pulled away from the curb, I watched my normal life recede in the side mirror, wondering if I'd ever get it back. The drive took us north, out of the city, and into an area where the houses grew farther apart and the properties sprawled across acres instead of lots. We eventually turned down a private road, marked only by a discreet gate that swung open at our approach. Blake's estate was nothing like I'd imagined. The main house was modern, but warm, all glass and natural stone that seemed to grow organically from the landscape. Lights glowed in the windows as dusk began to fall, giving the place an almost inviting appearance that belied its purpose as a fortress. Dominic helped me out of the car and led me to the front door, which opened before we reached it. Blake stood in the entrance, his tie gone and his shirt partially unbuttoned, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. His eyes scanned me head to toe, as if checking for injuries. "You're okay." "I'm confused and terrified, but physically fine," I corrected. "Come inside." He stepped back, gesturing me into a foyer that opened onto a stunning great room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a lake. "We need to talk." I followed him deeper into the house, my mind reeling from the events of the past few hours. Whatever was about to happen, whatever truth Blake was finally going to tell me, I had the distinct feeling that my life was about to change irrevocably. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. Blake's estate was both impressive and intimidating in equal measure. The great room he led me into featured modern furniture in neutral tones, expensive artwork on the walls, and that spectacular view of the private lake beyond the windows. It should have felt cold, impersonal, like a showroom. Instead, there was an unexpected warmth to the space, as if someone had actually lived here rather than just existing in it. "Sit." Blake gestured to one of the leather sofas. "Can I get you anything? Water, wine, something stronger?" "Answers," I said, remaining standing. "I want answers, Blake. You can't just uproot my entire life and expect me to sit quietly while you play the gracious host." He studied me for a long moment, something like approval flickering in his eyes. "Fair enough. Answers it is." He moved to a bar cart and poured himself 2 fingers of what looked like very expensive whiskey, then turned to face me, the glass cradled in his hand. "The meeting this afternoon was with the Bratva leadership. They're making a serious push into Chicago, and they want territory I'm not willing to give up. What does that have to do with me?" They did their homework. His jaw tightened. "They know everyone who works for me, everyone I have regular contact with. And they've identified the people close to me as potential leverage points." "I'm not close to you," I protested. "I'm your secretary, your assistant. Whatever you want to call it, I'm just an employee." Blake's laugh was bitter. "That's what I told myself, too. For 2 years, I convinced myself that keeping you at a distance, treating you with contempt, would protect you, would make you invisible to my enemies. He took a drink, the amber liquid catching the light. But the Bratva isn't stupid. They watch, they observe, and they notice patterns. And the pattern they noticed is that you're the only employee I've kept for more than a year. The only one I trust with sensitive information. The only one who has unrestricted access to my schedule, my files, my private office. The implications of what he was saying slowly sank in. They think I'm important to you. They know you're important to me. He set down his glass with careful control. Which means they'll use you to get to me if they can. They'll threaten you, hurt you, take you. Whatever it takes to gain leverage. I sank onto the sofa, my legs suddenly weak. This is insane. I'm nobody. I just answer phones and manage your calendar. You're not nobody, Brianna. Blake moved closer, crouching down so we were eye level. You're the woman who's worked for me through everything, who's never complained, never betrayed a confidence, never used her position for personal gain. You're the woman who stays late without being asked, who anticipates my needs before I voice them, who makes my entire operation run smoothly. His voice dropped lower. You're the woman I think about constantly, even when I'm trying not to, especially when I'm trying not to. My breath caught in my throat. What? I've been a bastard to you. The words came out rough, laced with something that sounded like self-loathing. Deliberately cruel, unnecessarily harsh. Because I thought if I pushed you away, if I made you hate me, you'd quit. You'd leave and be safe from all of this. He gestured vaguely, encompassing his world, his life, his choices. But you never left. You stayed no matter how badly I treated you, and I couldn't figure out why. My mother, I whispered. The medical bills. I needed the salary. I know. I've known for a long time. His hand came up, hesitating just inches from my face. Your dedication to your mother is one of the things I admire most about you. But it also means you're trapped here. Trapped with me, in a world that's about to get very dangerous. So what happens now? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. You keep me here as some kind of prisoner? For how long? Not a prisoner. A guest under my protection. His hand finally made contact, his fingers brushing along my jawline with aching gentleness. And for as long as it takes to neutralize the Bratva threat. That could be weeks, months. I know. I have a life, Blake, a job. Well, your job, but still, an apartment, responsibilities. Your job is safe. You'll work from here. Your apartment is being watched by my security team. As for responsibilities, he pulled out his phone and showed me a text conversation. I've already arranged for enhanced care for your mother. Private nurses around the clock. The best treatment money can buy. She'll want for nothing while you're here. I stared at the messages, emotions warring in my chest. Gratitude that my mother would be cared for. Anger that he'd made decisions without consulting me. Confusion about his motives. Why are you doing all of this? Because I can't lose you. The admission came out stark, raw. I can't watch another person I care about get hurt because of my choices. Another person? I picked up on the phrasing. Who did you lose before? Pain flashed across his face, there and gone so quickly I almost missed it. My sister. 5 years ago. The Calabresi family took her to get to me, by the time I found her. He stopped, swallowing hard. I was too late. I swore I'd never let that happen again. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Suddenly, his obsessive need for control, his cruelty designed to push me away, his current protectiveness, it all made a terrible kind of sense. Blake, I'm so sorry. Don't. He stood abruptly, putting distance between us. Don't pity me. I'm telling you this so you understand why I can't be rational about your safety. Why I'll do whatever it takes to keep you protected, even if you hate me for it. I don't hate you, I admitted quietly. I've been angry with you, frustrated by you, confused by you. But I've never hated you. He turned back to face me, surprise evident in his expression. Why not? After the way I've treated you. Because I've seen the other side of you too. I stood, closing some of the distance between us. The side that makes sure I eat when I'm working late. That remembered my mother's name and asked about her treatment. That called me Brianna instead of Mitchell when no one else was around. That side of you. That's the real Blake Moretti, isn't it? Not the cold, cruel boss you pretend to be. I don't know what's real anymore, he confessed. I've been playing a part for so long I'm not sure where the mask ends and the man begins. Then maybe it's time to figure it out. We stood there in the fading daylight, two people caught in a situation neither of us had chosen, connected by threads we didn't fully understand. The air between us felt charged, heavy with things unsaid. I should show you to your room, Blake said finally, breaking the moment. You'll need to get settled. Dinner's at 7 if you're hungry. Blake? Please, Brianna, let's just take this one step at a time. I nodded, recognizing that we both needed space to process everything that had happened. He led me through the house, pointing out rooms as we passed, a library filled with books, a media room with a massive screen, a gym that looked better equipped than most professional facilities. My room was on the second floor, with its own ensuite bathroom and a balcony overlooking the lake. It was easily 3 times the size of my entire apartment, decorated in soft blues and grays that somehow felt both luxurious and calming. There are clothes in the closet, Blake said from the doorway. I had them brought in this afternoon. If you need anything else, just ask. My room is at the end of the hall, and there's staff throughout the house if you need assistance. How did you know my size? I asked, moving to the closet to find it full of beautiful clothes, all in styles that suited me perfectly. I pay attention, was all he said. After he left, I explored my new temporary home, trying to wrap my mind around the surreal turn my life had taken. Less than 12 hours ago, I'd been sitting at my desk, coordinating Blake's schedule and fielding phone calls. Now I was standing in a bedroom that belonged in a magazine spread, wearing borrowed clothes, under the protection of a man I'd thought I knew but was realizing I'd barely understood at all. I showered in the enormous bathroom, washing away the stress of the day under water pressure that felt like heaven. When I emerged, wrapped in the softest towel I'd ever touched, I found a note had been slipped under my door. Dinner on the terrace at 7. Casual attire. B. I dressed in a simple sundress from the closet, which fit perfectly, of course, and made my way downstairs. The house was quiet, but I could hear voices coming from somewhere deeper in the building. Blake's voice, and at least 2 others, male and unfamiliar. Following the sound of conversation, I found myself in a sleek, modern kitchen, where Blake stood with 2 men I recognized from around the office. They stopped talking immediately when I entered. Gentlemen, that's all for tonight, Blake said dismissively. We'll continue this in the morning. The men nodded respectfully to me as they left, and then Blake and I were alone. I'm sorry about that, he said, already moving to the refrigerator. Security briefing. Nothing you need to worry about. Everything about this situation worries me, I admitted. He pulled out ingredients with practiced efficiency, and I realized with surprise that he was going to cook. Do you like salmon? Yes. Good. Have a seat. Tell me about your day. The normalcy of the request, after everything that had happened, made me laugh. It came out slightly hysterical. My day? My day included being told I'm a target for the Russian mob, being driven to a mansion by a man who looks like he could break me in half, and discovering that my boss has been secretly caring about me for 2 years while treating me like garbage. So, Pretty standard Friday. A smile tugged at Blake's lips. A real smile, one that transformed his entire face. When you put it that way, I can see how it might be overwhelming. Overwhelming is one word for it. I watched him move around the kitchen with surprising grace, seasoning the fish, chopping vegetables. I didn't know you could cook. My mother insisted all her children learn. She said a man who couldn't feed himself wasn't really a man. His expression softened with memory. She was very traditional in some ways, very progressive in others. Was? I asked gently. She passed 8 years ago. Cancer. He slid the salmon into the oven and turned his attention to the vegetables. It was fast, at least. She didn't suffer long. I'm sorry, that must have been hard. Losing people always is. He glanced at me, something vulnerable in his eyes. Which is why I need you to take this situation seriously, Brianna. The Bratva doesn't make idle threats. If they say they'll target you to get to me, they mean it. I believe you, I said softly. I'm scared, but I believe you. Good. Fear will keep you cautious. He finished with the vegetables and poured us each a glass of white wine. 2 unexpected circumstances. I raised my glass. And to figuring out what's real. We ate dinner on the terrace as the sun set over the lake, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The food was delicious, the conversation surprisingly easy now that we'd established this new dynamic. Blake told me about growing up in Chicago, about his father's legitimate businesses that he'd inherited and expanded. He talked about his surviving sister, Maria, who lived in Italy with her husband and children, safely removed from the dangerous side of the family business. And I told him about my childhood in Ohio, about my father who'd left when I was 10, about working my way through college before my mother's diagnosis had derailed my plans for graduate school. You wanted to be a teacher, he said. Not a question, but a statement, as if he'd already known this about me. How did you... The books on your desk. Always different subjects. Always educational. The way you explain things when people ask questions. He swirled the wine in his glass. You would have been a good teacher. Maybe someday, I said, though I couldn't quite imagine that future anymore. As the evening wore on and the wine loosened our tongues, the conversation shifted to more personal territory. Blake asked about my relationships, my life outside of work. I admitted there wasn't much to tell. Working for him had consumed most of my time and energy. No boyfriend? He asked, his tone casual but his eyes intense. No one serious. A few dates here and there, but nothing that went anywhere. I hesitated, then decided to be honest. It's hard to get close to someone when you're keeping secrets about where you work and what you do. What secrets have you kept? That my boss is involved in organized crime. That I sometimes hear things I probably shouldn't. That I've become complicit in a world I never wanted to be part of. I met his gaze directly. You asked me once why I stayed. The money was part of it, but not all of it. What was the other part? You, I admitted, the wine making me brave. Even when you were cruel, there were moments when I'd catch glimpses of someone different. Someone careful and strategic, and deeply loyal to the people he cares about. I stayed because I wanted to understand that person, to know if he was real, or if I was imagining him. Blake set down his wine glass very carefully. And now? Now that you're seeing more of who I really am? Now I'm more confused than ever, I confessed. Because the man who cooked me dinner and told me about his mother isn't the same man who treated me with contempt for 2 years. But somehow, you're both of them. And I don't know which version to believe in. Believe in this one. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. This is who I am when I'm not trying to push you away. This is who I could be if you'd let me. My heart was racing, my palm warm beneath his. Blake, I know it's too soon. I know I have no right to ask for your trust after everything. His thumb traced circles on my wrist, sending sparks of sensation up my arm. But I'm asking anyway. Stay here. Let me protect you, and maybe we can figure out what this is between us. What if there's nothing between us? I asked, even though I knew it was a lie. What if it's just proximity and danger making us feel things that aren't real? Then we'll find out together. His eyes held mine, sincere and vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. But I don't think that's what this is. I think we've been dancing around this for 2 years, both of us too afraid to acknowledge it. I wanted to pull away, to protect myself from the inevitable heartbreak of falling for someone who lived in a world of violence and danger. But I couldn't make myself move, couldn't break the connection of his hand on mine. I need time, I whispered, to process all of this, to figure out what I want. Take all the time you need. He squeezed my hand gently before releasing it. I'm not going anywhere, and neither for now are you. The implications of that statement, that I was here indefinitely, under his protection and his control, should have terrified me. But as I looked at Blake Moretti in the dying light of day, seeing the carefully hidden vulnerability beneath his dangerous exterior, all I felt was a complicated tangle of fear, desire, and something that might have been hope. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, momentarily disoriented by the Egyptian cotton sheets and the distant sound of water lapping against a shore. Then memory crashed back. The Bratva threat, Blake's confession, dinner on the terrace where everything between us had shifted irrevocably. My phone showed it was already past 9, later than I'd slept in years. There were several missed calls from a number I didn't recognize, but no voicemails. Probably reporters or telemarketers who'd somehow gotten my personal cell. I showered and dressed in jeans and a soft cashmere sweater from the mysteriously well-stocked closet, then ventured downstairs. The house was quiet, but I could smell coffee and hear the faint clatter of dishes from what I assumed was the kitchen. I found Blake at the counter, wearing casual clothes, dark jeans and a fitted black t-shirt that emphasized the lean muscle of his shoulders and arms. It was jarring to see him like this, so different from the sharply dressed executive I'd worked for. This version of him looked approachable, almost domestic. Good morning. He looked up from his laptop, a genuine smile crossing his face. Coffee. Please. I settled onto one of the bar stools, accepting the mug he poured for me. I'm sorry I slept so late. I didn't mean to. Don't apologize. You needed rest. He slid a plate across the counter. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I made a variety. Pastries from the bakery in town, fruit, some breakfast sandwiches. The spread was impressive, and my stomach growled in response. I selected a croissant and some berries, acutely aware of Blake watching me. Did you sleep well? He asked. Better than expected, actually. I took a sip of coffee. Perfect, just the way I liked it. Of course, he'd noticed that too. What's the plan for today? I need to make some calls, meet with my security team, but I'd like you to join me for part of it. You should understand the scope of the situation. I'm not sure I want to understand, I admitted. Ignorance feels safer somehow. Ignorance is never safer. Blake's expression grew serious. Not in my world. The more you know, the better you can protect yourself. An hour later, I found myself in Blake's home office, a sophisticated space with multiple computer monitors and what looked like a serious security setup. 3 men were already present, Dominic, who'd driven me yesterday, and 2 others I'd seen around the main office. Gentlemen, you remember Brianna, Blake said, gesturing for me to take a seat beside him at the conference table. She'll be sitting in on our security briefings from now on. If they were surprised by this announcement, they didn't show it. Dominic nodded respectfully. Miss Mitchell. The Bratva situation has escalated. Blake began without preamble. They made a move last night on one of our warehouses in the south side. No casualties, but they made their message clear. What message? I asked quietly. That they're not backing down, that they're willing to engage in open conflict. Blake pulled up a map on one of the monitors. They're targeting our operations systematically, trying to choke out our revenue streams. And what are we doing about it? Dominic asked. Playing defense for now. I don't want to start a war if we can avoid it. Blake's jaw tightened. But I also won't let them think we're weak. Marcus, what's the status on the Harrison Street property? The meeting continued for another hour, with Blake and his team discussing strategies, contingencies, and security protocols that made my head spin. I sat quietly, absorbing information that confirmed everything I'd suspected, but never wanted to know for certain about Blake's operations. When the men finally left, Blake turned to me. I know that was a lot to take in. You're actually running a criminal empire, I said flatly. I mean, I knew, but hearing it discussed so casually. It's not all criminal. Most of my businesses are legitimate. He stood, moving to the window that overlooked his estate. The less legal activities, they were established by my father, my grandfather. By the time I inherited, walking away wasn't an option. Too many people dependent on this organization. Too many enemies waiting for any sign of weakness. You could have gotten out, I argued. Started over somewhere else. Could I? He turned to face me. With the Bratva, the Calabresi, every other family watching and waiting. They don't let people leave, Brianna. Not alive anyway. So you're trapped. We're all trapped by our choices. He moved closer, stopping just in front of me. You're trapped by your mother's medical needs. I'm trapped by family legacy and responsibility. The question isn't whether we're trapped, it's what we do within those constraints. And what are you doing? Trying to transition everything toward legitimacy. It's slow, gradual. But over the past 5 years, I've reduced our illegal operations by 40%. I've invested in legitimate businesses, distanced us from the worst of the violence. His hand came up to cut my cheek, but I can't do it overnight. And I can't do it if I'm dead. I leaned into his touch without thinking, drawn to the warmth of his palm against my skin. Why are you telling me all of this? Because I want you to understand who I am, what I'm trying to become. His thumb traced my cheekbone. Because I want you to make an informed choice about whether you can accept this life. You're asking me to accept a lot. I know. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching mine. But I'm also offering you everything I have. Protection, security, a life where you'll never have to worry about money or safety again. Where your mother will have the best care possible. That sounds like you're trying to buy me. I'm trying to give you options you've never had before. His voice was low, intimate. I'm trying to show you that what's between us is real. Not just a product of danger and forced proximity. Blake. Whatever I'd been about to say was cut off by his lips meeting mine. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, giving me the chance to pull away. When I didn't, when I instead leaned into him, it deepened into something more urgent. His hand slid into my hair, angling my face for better access. I gripped his shoulders, feeling the solid strength of him beneath my fingers. The kiss was everything I'd secretly wanted, and everything I'd told myself was impossible. Heat and need, and a connection that felt dangerous in its intensity. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Blake rested his forehead against mine. Tell me to stop, and I will. Tell me you don't want this, and I'll respect that. I don't know what I want, I admitted breathlessly. Everything's happening so fast. Then let's slow down. He pressed a soft kiss to my forehead, my temple, my cheek. We have time. We have all the time in the world. But even as he said it, I wondered if it was true. Because in his world, time was a luxury no one could guarantee. The rest of the day passed in a strange domesticity. Blake showed me around the estate, the paths through the surrounding woods, the private beach on the lake, the security measures built discreetly into the property. We had lunch on the terrace again, talking about everything except the situation that had brought us here. It was evening when the first sign of trouble appeared. Blake's phone rang during dinner, and his expression went cold as he listened to whoever was on the other end. When? He stood abruptly. Is he stable? I'm on my way. What happened? I asked as he ended the call. One of my guys was shot. He's in surgery now, but... Blake ran a hand through his hair, the first time I'd seen him visibly shaken. I need to go to the hospital. Dominic will stay here with you. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. I'm coming, I insisted. If this is my life now, if I'm supposed to understand your world, then I need to see all of it, not just the nice parts. He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my expression must have convinced him. Fine, but you stay close to me at all times. And if I tell you to do something, you do it without question. Understood, I nodded, already grabbing my jacket. The drive to the hospital was tense and silent. Blake made several phone calls in rapid Italian, his voice clipped and commanding. I watched the city pass outside the tinted windows, wondering what I'd just committed myself to by insisting on coming along. The hospital was a private facility on the north side, clearly expensive and exclusive. Blake bypassed the main entrance, leading me through a side door where a woman in scrubs was waiting. Mr. Moretti. He's just out of surgery. The doctor will brief you shortly. We followed her to a private waiting area, where several of Blake's men were already gathered. They straightened when they saw him, their expressions grim. Boss, one of them said. It was the Bratva. They ambushed him outside his apartment. Blake's jaw tightened. How bad? 2 shots, shoulder and abdomen. Doc says he'll survive, but it was close. I watched Blake process this information, saw the cold fury building behind his eyes. This was the other side of him, the dangerous one, the man who commanded an empire through fear and respect. Double security on all our people, he ordered. No one goes anywhere alone. And find out who the shooter was. I want a name by morning. Yes, sir. A doctor appeared, still in surgical scrubs. Mr. Moretti, your associate is stable. The surgery went well. He'll need several weeks of recovery, but he should make a full recovery. Can I see him? Briefly. He's still sedated, but you can go in. Blake turned to me. Wait here. I nodded, watching him disappear through the double doors. Left alone with his men, I felt suddenly conspicuous, out of place in this world of violence and loyalty. You're the secretary, one of them said. It wasn't a question. Executive assistant, I corrected automatically. He's different with you. The man studied me with frank curiosity. Softer. We've never seen him like that before. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I simply nodded. Blake returned 15 minutes later, his expression tight. Let's go. The drive back to the estate was silent. I could feel the tension radiating off him, the barely controlled anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. When we finally reached the house, he went straight to his study without a word. I gave him space for an hour, then knocked softly on the door. Come in. He was sitting in the dark, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the lake. I crossed the room and sat beside him, not speaking, just being present. This is what my life is, he said finally. Violence, retaliation, constant danger. This is what I'm asking you to accept. I know. Do you? He turned to face me, and in the moonlight filtering through the windows, He looked haunted. Because I'm not sure I can accept it anymore. I'm tired, Brianna. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of putting the people I care about at risk. Tired of living in a world where a good man gets shot just for working for me. I took the glass from his hand and set it aside, then moved closer until I could rest my head against his shoulder. Then maybe it's time to make a change. It's not that simple. Nothing worth doing ever is. We sat in the darkness together, two people trying to find their way through impossible circumstances, connected by something neither of us fully understood, but both of us were beginning to trust. The days that followed established a new rhythm. I worked from Blake's estate, managing his legitimate business affairs, while carefully avoiding questions from colleagues about my sudden relocation. Blake had told the office I was working on a special project that required discretion, which wasn't entirely untrue. My mother's care had indeed been upgraded, just as Blake promised. The reports from her nurses showed steady improvement, and when I video called her, she looked better than she had in months. She asked about my special assignment, and I hated lying to her, but the truth was too complicated to explain. Blake and I fell into an unexpected domesticity. We had breakfast together most mornings, worked from adjacent offices during the day, and spent evenings walking the estate grounds or reading in comfortable silence. There were more kisses, growing more heated each time, but Blake always pulled back before things went too far. "I want you to be sure," he'd say, his control visibly fraying. "I want you to choose this with a clear head, not because you feel trapped or grateful." But with each passing day, my certainty grew. This wasn't Stockholm Syndrome or misplaced gratitude. What I felt for Blake Moretti was real, complicated and terrifying, and wonderful all at once. It was a Wednesday afternoon, 2 weeks after I'd moved to the estate, when everything came to a head. I was in Blake's office, reviewing contracts, when Dominic burst in without knocking. "Boss, we have a problem. The Bratva just hit 3 of our locations simultaneously. They're making a coordinated move." Blake was on his feet instantly. "Casualties?" "Unknown. Reports are still coming in. Get everyone to the safe houses. Now." Blake turned to me. "Brianna, I need you to go to the panic room. Dominic will show you." "No." I stood, my heart pounding. "If you're in danger, I want to know what's happening. This isn't up for debate." "Yes, it is." I moved closer, gripping his arm. "You said I needed to understand your world. Well, this is part of it. Stop trying to protect me from the reality of your life." His jaw tightened, but before he could argue, his phone rang again. He answered with a curt, "Talk to me." Then his expression went cold. "When? How many?" "I'm on my way." He ended the call and looked at Dominic. "They hit the main warehouse. There are casualties. Get the car ready." "Blake," I started. "You're coming with me," he said abruptly. "Because you're right. You need to see this. All of it. But stay close to me. And if things get dangerous, you follow Dominic's orders without question. Understood?" I nodded, already grabbing my jacket. The drive downtown was tense. Blake made call after call, his voice clipped and commanding as he coordinated his response. Dominic drove with focused intensity, weaving through traffic with practiced ease. The warehouse district was cordoned off with police tape when we arrived, but Blake bypassed the official response, heading instead to a building 2 blocks away where several of his men had gathered. The scene inside was organized chaos. Men with weapons, computers displaying security feeds, phones ringing constantly. This was the nerve center of Blake's operation, and seeing it in full action drove home just how extensive his empire really was. "Status report," Blake demanded as soon as we entered. 4 dead, 6 injured. They hit us with 12 men, heavily armed. Got through our perimeter defenses like they had blueprints. Blake's expression went deadly calm, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. "They had inside information. That's what we think." Someone told them about our security protocols, our shift changes, everything. Find the leak. Blake's voice was ice. I don't care what it takes. Find them. I watched him transform before my eyes into someone I barely recognized. Cold, calculating, ruthless. This was the man who commanded respect through fear, who made the hard decisions that kept his empire intact. It should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a strange clarity. This was who Blake Moretti was. All of him. The gentleman who cooked me dinner, and the dangerous criminal who ordered people hunted down. And somehow, I wanted both versions. The meeting continued for another hour, with Blake issuing orders and making decisions with swift precision. When we finally left, heading back to the estate in heavy silence, I could see the toll it had taken on him. His shoulders were tight, his jaw set, his hands gripping the armrest with white-knuckled intensity. Back at the house, he went straight to his study. I followed despite the clear dismissal in his body language. Blake. Not now, Brianna. His back was to me, his stance rigid. I need to think. Think later. Talk to me now. I moved closer, placing my hand on his shoulder. You're not alone in this. He spun to face me, and the raw emotion in his eyes stole my breath. 4 men died today because of me, because they worked for me, believed in me, trusted that I could protect them. And I failed. You didn't kill them. The Bratva did. Same thing. He pulled away, pacing the length of the room. This is my responsibility. Everything that happens in this organization comes back to me. Then make it count. I moved into his path, forcing him to stop. Use this anger, this guilt, and turn it into something better. You said you want to transition toward legitimacy. Stop talking about it and do it. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. I grabbed his face, making him look at me. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick. But you can do it. You're already doing it. The man I've come to know these past few weeks, he's not just a criminal. He's someone trying to build something better. You don't understand the stakes. Then help me understand. My voice softened. Let me in completely, Blake. Stop protecting me from the hard parts. I'm choosing this life, choosing you, but I need you to trust me with all of it. Something shifted in his expression, the carefully maintained control cracking. If I let you in completely, if you see everything I've done, everything I'm capable of, you'll leave. You'll realize what I really am, and you'll run. Try me. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the war happening behind his eyes, the need to open up battling against years of self-protection. Finally, he reached for me, pulling me against him with desperate intensity. I've killed people, Brianna. Not just ordered it done, but pulled the trigger myself. I've made decisions that destroyed lives, families. I've chosen profit over morality more times than I can count. His voice was raw, confession spilling out like poison he'd been holding in too long. I'm not a good man trying to redeem himself. I'm a bad man trying to be better, and there's a difference. I know, I whispered, wrapping my arms around him. I've known for a while now. And I'm still here. Why? The question came out broken, vulnerable. After everything you've seen, everything you know, why are you still here? Because I see who you're trying to become, not just who you've been. I pulled back enough to look up at him. Because you make me feel safe and terrified and alive all at the same time. Because somehow, against all logic and reason, I've fallen for you. The admission hung between us, irrevocable and true. Blake's eyes searched mine, as if looking for any sign of doubt or deception. Whatever he found must have satisfied him, because he kissed me with a hunger that had been building for weeks. This kiss was different from the others, less controlled, more desperate. His hands tangled in my hair, his body pressed against mine with unmistakable need. I responded with equal fervor, pouring 2 years of complicated emotions into the connection of our lips. "Are you sure?" he managed between kisses, even as his hands roamed my back, my sides, everywhere he could reach. "Once we cross this line, Brianna." "I'm sure," I interrupted. "I want this. I want you. All of you. Even the parts that scare me." He swept me into his arms with startling ease, carrying me out of the study and up the stairs to his room. The master bedroom was masculine and sophisticated, with a massive bed and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. Moonlight streamed in, casting everything in silver shadows. Blake set me down gently, his hands framing my face. "If at any point you want to stop." "I won't." I pulled him down for another kiss, and this time, there was no holding back. What followed was a revelation. Not just physical, though that was overwhelming in its intensity, but emotional. Each touch, each whispered word, each moment of connection stripped away another layer of the walls we'd both built. Blake was tender and demanding by turns, attentive to my every response, as if learning me was the most important thing in his world. Afterward, we lay tangled together in his sheets, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing idle patterns on my shoulder. "I love you," he said into the darkness. "I think I've loved you since the moment you started working for me, but I was too afraid to admit it." "That's why you were so cruel," I realized. "You were trying to push me away because you loved me." "Pathetic, isn't it?" He pressed a kiss to my forehead. The great Blake Moretti, brought to his knees by his own secretary. "Executive assistant," I corrected with a smile. "And for what it's worth, I think I've loved you too. I just didn't recognize it through all the anger and confusion." We lay in comfortable silence for a while, but I could feel the tension returning to Blake's body, the weight of the day's events settling back over him. "What happens now?" I asked. "With the bratva, with everything?" "War, probably." His voice was grim. "They've escalated beyond the point of negotiation. It's them or us now. Then we end it." I lifted my head to look at him. "Not with more violence if we can help it, but we end it decisively, on your terms." "We?" He raised an eyebrow. "You're part of this now?" "I've been part of this since the moment you brought me here." I settled back against his chest. "Besides, you said it yourself. I'm good at anticipating problems and solving them. Maybe it's time to put those skills to use on something bigger than your schedule." A smile tugged at his lips. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that you need someone who understands both sides of your operation, the legitimate and the less so. Someone you trust completely. Someone who has a vested interest in keeping you alive." I traced patterns on his chest. "I'm suggesting that maybe I could be more than just your assistant." "Brianna Mitchell, are you asking to be my partner?" "In every sense of the word." I looked up at him, serious now. "I'm in this, Blake, completely. Your world, your life, your fight, all of it. But I want to be an equal partner, not someone you protect and hide away." He was quiet for a long moment, and I could see the conflict playing out behind his eyes. Finally, he nodded. "Partners. In everything." "Partners," I agreed. We sealed the deal with another kiss, and as we made love again with the moonlight streaming across us, I knew that my life had irrevocably changed. I'd walked into Blake Moretti's world, and instead of being destroyed by it, I'd found myself, found my strength, my purpose, and against all odds, found love in the most unexpected place. The Bratva conflict was still ahead of us, still dangerous and potentially deadly. But facing it together, as partners, as equals, as two people who'd finally stopped hiding from what they wanted. That felt like the beginning of something stronger than fear. As I drifted off to sleep in Blake's arms, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From secretary to prisoner to partner. From contempt to protection to love. It hadn't been easy, and the road ahead promised to be even harder. But for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't afraid of what came next.